Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. I am your host, as usual, Liam, or at the FSA Tweets on Twitter. Today, we have got a great show. We've got a rookie sleepers show. So, to help, we brought in a guest. But first, Rich, or at Dynasty Island on Twitter. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm very good, thank you, Liam. I'm looking forward to this one. This was, I think, the idea is to cover off any of the big names that perhaps we didn't cover in the positional previews, but potentially a few deeper dives. And I think definitely our guest made me do some work because there was a few guys that I didn't have ranks, didn't have any data for. Some guys I couldn't even find any films for, so it might be over to him when we get to talk to those guys.
Well, as you've teased him, we may as well bring him straight in. So Matt at MattFF Dynasty on Twitter from the Wildcard podcast, also is an analyst and editor for the FF_astronauts. How are you doing, Matt? How's everything going?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks, Liam. A pleasure to come and join you guys. Obviously, it's going to be a fun show. I've enjoyed hearing that I've been making you both work and rummage for these players that I've selected a little bit later on in the show. But yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to chatting to you both and getting stuck into it.
So at the start of every show with guests, we always have a little bit of an interview so the listeners can understand and get to know you a little bit better, Matt. So we'll start off with, how long have you been playing fantasy football as a whole?
I'd say it's roughly about 6 or 7 years now, I think, since I've been playing. I don't know what you two are like, but I was quite late in starting watching the NFL and American football. Obviously, over here in the UK, it's not as readily as available, especially back then. It wasn't as readily available as it is now. And it was actually a trip to Las Vegas that really got me hooked. I went there, and it was the opening week of the season when I think it was like 2010-ish, that kind of range. And I got hooked on American football. Slowly started to dive into the fantasy side of things. And yeah, I'd say it's been about 7 years that I've been playing fantasy football.
I think I started watching fantasy football, or football in general, a little bit later. I think I came in around 2013-ish.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear that you haven't been playing for 20, 30 years. Like we seem to have it.
Do I look like old, Liam? Do I look like I could be playing for that one?
Definitely not, Matt.
Cheeky man.
Definitely not, Matt. But every guest we've had on so far seems to have been playing for near enough my entire lifetime. So.
If you want to take shots at me, Liam, just because I'm not that much older than you. But yeah, I think I watched my first game sort of 98, 99. So yeah, before Liam was born, I think.
Yeah, I was born in 98, so you're probably watching American football just as I was being born.
Yeah,
right. That makes you feel old, doesn't it, Rich? That makes you feel really old.
It does. Well, before the show, Liam was telling me he's starting to feel old because he's now older than some of these rookie prospects. I turned around and said, well, I'm at an age where, if I was a player, I'd be talking about retirement. So yeah. Anyway, let's stop talking about how old I am. Matt, how did you kind of turn the playing fantasy football into kind of producing content?
It all come about, to be honest, when COVID came along. I think that's quite popular for a lot of people recently, and a lot of spare time. My job myself, I'm a joiner carpenter, so don't really have a lot of access to being on the computer during the day and everything. And when the lockdown came in, I had a lot of spare time, didn't really know what to do with it. I already had this passion for fantasy football. Ever since I started playing it, I'm kind of one of those guys that becomes addicted to something. If I really enjoy it, I'm all in on it. And it was the same with fantasy football. And just thought I'd test myself, really dive into producing content. I set up my own little website, just putting things out there, really, just as I say, something to do during the lockdown. And it actually came about that Kev, my co-host on the Fantasy Wildcard, he actually reached out to me. He must have seen one of the articles I did. I think the first one I ever did was about the Cincinnati Bengals when they just drafted Joe Burrow. And Kev must have seen it. He put me in touch with the guys at the Astronauts, and ever since then I've been producing content for those guys.
So you're obviously the co-host for Fantasy Wildcard. How did you get into doing that with Kev and Ali over there?
Yeah, well, Kev invited me on as a guest when it was when he had Rich over there as his co-host when they was both with the Fantasy Football Astronauts. Reached out to me to just appear and go on a podcast. It was my first ever podcast. I was definitely nervous. Something that I'm not really that used to at the time. I didn't really know what I was doing. It kind of thrown it at the deep end a little bit, but they're both good guys. So yeah, went on as a guest. Really enjoyed it, and they approached me to join them as a co-host. And as I say, when I'm committed to something, I dive into it, and I thought it'd be nice to put myself out of the comfort zone a little bit and do a podcast. So yeah, joined those guys, and obviously it's developed over the years. We've brought Ali in when Rich stepped away, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that kind of sounds similar to how Rich roped me into doing this every Tuesday with him.
You make it sound like I bullied you into it. You were desperate. You were very
I was going to start up my own podcast, and then you're like, Liam, do you want to just jump on this, see whether you like it? And then 2 weeks later, do you want to be the co-host?
Pretty much how it went for me. Yeah.
I'm not saying it was a bad thing, Rich. It was the best thing that this show ever had, mate. So let's move on. Before I let Rich get a word in on that comment. As I said earlier, rookie sleepers preview. So last year, I believe this was my first show ever. This was the one that you got me on to do, Rich. So Matt,
needed a big upgrade this year.
I was about to say I was very nervous. So if you probably go back to listen to that, even though some of the players that I mentioned did end up working out, or I still have hope for them, I was very nervous, so I probably didn't get my point across anyway. But Matt, we've got a pro on this time round.
Is that Rich? I feel like you're teeing me up for something that I can't live up to here.
Don't stroke his ego, mate. Don't stroke his ego. So we'll throw it over to you. Just so the listeners are aware, we've obviously done all of our positional preview shows now. So the idea of this is to cover some of the guys we haven't covered in those preview shows, but also give you a little bit of a platform to go and talk about some sleepers that you wanted to talk about as well. And as you said, you made us do a bunch of work with one of the prospects coming later on, trying to figure out or find stats and film and stuff. But the first player we've got on our list, Matt, is Johan Dotson. Mm-hmm. He is coming from Penn State. He is. I've had a quick look at his stats. He had a massive target share, 32% target share at college. His dominator rating was in the 90th percentile. He looks really good. He's a really fast player, and his route running seems to be really, really crisp. But what can you tell me about Johan Dotson?
Yeah, well, I'll start with saying this is a guy that I'm not extremely high on myself personally. I know this is one of the guys. Rich must have put this one on because I know Rich quite likes Dodson. I've got him as my wide receiver 10 currently in the class. So as I say, I don't think that's quite as high up as Rich has got him. But yeah, somebody that I'm not super high, not super excited about. But as you say, if you just watch the tape, super exciting. The amount of highlight reel catches that you'll see when you watch his tape, it definitely stands out. As you mentioned, probably one of the best deep threats in the entire class. Just looking at his stats, like you touched upon, and predominantly played out on the out wide. 75% he actually played out wide. Getting a lot of comps to somebody that's quite relevant in the news in Tyreek Hill. Just because I think more of his size, he's a smaller guy, 180 pounds. So as I say, not one of the bigger guys, and that will probably be a knock against him. He is quite undersized. I'm not convinced personally that he is somebody like Tyreek Hill. There's no doubt that he's a great athlete. As I say, he's a really good deep threat, but I don't think he's quite on those levels as somebody like Tyreek Hill, but definitely a great athlete. And as you mentioned, I think when he gets on the field, it's going to be really exciting to watch.
So, Rich, I know that you're ready to jump in here because you've got him ranked higher than Matt. What can you tell me about Johan Dotson? Because when I watched some of his highlights earlier, I quite liked what I saw, but I need to do a bit more of a deep dive on him.
I think if you were to build a non-stud receiver that was kind of ticked all of my boxes, it would pretty much be Johan Dotson. I think he's lightning fast. He's got the track background. He's, I think, a very, very good route runner. And I think from a an analytical perspective, he's got a pretty decent profile. And I think that I wouldn't be shocked if he's the kind of guy that can sneak up into the back end of the first round come the NFL draft. And I think if that happens, you're suddenly going to see a lot of people jumping all over him. He is my wide receiver 6. For me, I see it as kind of an elite 5 in the wide receiver room. And I think he's the next man up for me. I think the concern, I hear you, Matt, saying about slightly undersized. I feel that's a little bit harsh. This guy's, what is he, 5'10", 5'11", something like that, comparing him to Tyreek Hill's maybe a little bit harsh. I think he's got a fair few inches on him. I think he's probably underweight, but I know without wanting to trigger sort of BMI Twitter, it's not really something that I believe in. I think that, you look at the success that Devonta Smith had last year transitioning, and obviously, that skinny frame. I think that if you can create separation, I don't think anything else matters, quite frankly. And I think that he has that good pace, but I think he's very natural and smooth in and out of his breaks. And I think that he's the kind of guy that is never going to be a flashy pick. But I think if he can sneak into the back end of the first round and end up on a good team, I think he could be a really interesting wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for an NFL team. And I think he's ever going to be a complete stud from a fantasy perspective? Probably not. I don't think he's ever going to be anything more than his team's wide receiver 2. If you're punting for absolute upside, he's probably not the one. But I do think that he's going to settle in that sort of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 fantasy range, maybe sort of a week-to-week flex. And at the beginning to middle of the second round in Superflex drafts, that's a position where I'm pretty happy taking that sort of player.
So, Rich, where do you see yourself taking him if we had a startup today? So for the listeners, it's the 23rd of March. We're pre-recording, unfortunately. So if you were to take or do a rookie draft right this second, where would you be taking him?
So talking Superflex, I've got him currently as my 12th ranked player. So I'd be happy taking him with the 112. I don't think you'd have to take him there. I'd need to go and have a look at his ADP and things like that. I think you can probably get him beginning to middle of the second, but yeah, that's where I'd be comfortable taking him.
How about yourself, Matt? Do you have I'm assuming you're a little bit lower than the 12th player.
Yeah. I'm probably putting him more towards that mid-second, maybe even pushing him back towards the back end of the second. Rich made a good point there. I think he's one of those guys that, depending on the draft capital he gets, the landing spot I think is going to be key for somebody like Dotson. I'm going to want him on one of these offenses where he can use that deep threat that he's got and really take advantage of what he's good at. So for me, he's probably in that mid-second, but as Rich touched upon, he's definitely a guy that I could see myself moving up a couple of spots, all depending on if he does get that back end of the first round draft capital in the NFL. Then I think you've got to move with that. You've got to trust that the draft capital is going to lead you in the right direction with somebody like Dodson, and maybe push up towards the early second round for me in Superflex rookie draft.
So the next player we've got on our list is David Bell from Purdue. But the looks of it, this one's the opposite for you two, which isn't as high as you, Matt. But go on, let us know why you're so high on David Bell compared to Rich, and see if you can try and change his mind.
Yeah, well, as you say, now we're moving on to a player that I do actually quite like. He's right up there as my wide receiver 6 currently in this draft class. I will admit, if we're just looking at the recent things that we found out, obviously the combine didn't have the best of combine. He ran a 4.65 in the 40-yard dash. Then if you look at his relative athletic score, he only got a 2.72 out of 10, which it's going to raise some flags. I think I actually tweeted about it at the time. There's going to be people that are going to see that all that red in terms of his RAS score, and they're going to start to be concerned. But I think we always knew that he's not a blazer. He's not like Dodson that we just talk about. To be honest, it's quite the opposite of it. more of a big-bodied go up and get it kind of receiver. And we've just got to look back at the production that he had as a freshman. Absolutely burst onto the scene, 86 receptions, over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns as a freshman. Just like his former teammate Rondale Moore did over at Purdue. He was exactly the same as a freshman, just burst onto the scene. And yeah, I just think all he does is produce just under 3,000 yards, 21 touchdowns in his career in college. And as I say, just a go up and get it kind of receiver. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a T. Higgins, maybe not quite the athleticism that T. Higgins has, but as I say, a guy that can make them 50-50 balls more into 70-30 balls. Is really good at the catch point. So a little bit about him that he models his game on Allen Robinson, and I do quite see that another guy that pretty similar in terms of his size and stature. And as I say, really good in the contested catches. If you watch a lot of his tape, that's something that really stands out. I do think that people are going to start to overreact, as I say, to that poor combine and the fact that he's not really a guy that's known for the separation, but he's a guy that separates more when he goes up and gets the ball. And as I say, he's now really starting to fit into that sleeper label, like the show that we're talking about. He is becoming a sleeper just because I think people are starting to fade him, and yeah, I can't wait to scoop him up personally if people are going to fade him.
Rich, it looks like you're fading more than Matt is right now. So let's see the other side of the coin.
Yeah, I loved David Bell as a freshman in a couple of Devy leagues. I was all over him. I think, every time last year I watched Rondale Moore, I sort of thought, who's this interesting guy on the other side of the field? I think, there's a lot there to like. I guess I was really disappointed with him this last year. And I think that for me, I think he's good quite a lot, but I don't know what he's great at. And I worry that, we talk about he's not a great athlete. He's not a great route runner. Okay, he wins in contested catches, but is that going to translate to the next level? Because he's not, he's not T. Higgins. What is T. Higgins, like 6'4", 6'5"? He's only 6'1". Like, he's not massive. He's not got that elite body control. And I just worry that sometimes I think, for me, the type of player that struggles to translate to the NFL is that contested catch player that doesn't have that elite aspect, that sort of, we talked about it at the quarterback show a few weeks ago, that sort of one thing that they can hang their hat on. And I just don't know with David Bell. I think he's good at a lot, but I just don't know if he's great. And I worry that that's not going to translate to the next level, which is why I think I'd rather take a punt on, someone like a Johan Dotson, or, maybe even someone like Christian Watson or someone like that has got more boom bust potential and has got an elite skill that you can kind of hang your hat on. Whereas I just think that David Bell, look, I could be completely wrong. He could be someone like a Keenan Allen, but I think that whilst Keenan Allen isn't an elite athlete, doesn't separate at the end of his routes, he is a very savvy route runner, and I just don't know if David Bell is that. It could just be a case of at Purdue, he ran literally every route you could ever imagine. He was used all over the field, and I do wonder if he gets into an NFL offense where instead of having to run 30 different routes, combinations, he focuses on a few and he becomes a better route runner, and maybe that's where he finds his success. But I just am concerned that he's a kind of jack of all trades, master of none, and I'm not sure that translates particularly well. So,
talking about David Bell, how much stock do you put into his target share, Rich? Because we spoke about the last player, Johan Dotson, having a 32% target share in college. David Bell wasn't too far behind with a 28.7 target share across the 3 years that he played. How much stock do you put into that when you're evaluating players, especially him?
Yeah, some. In terms of, just to take you behind the curtain, I guess a little bit, in terms of rookie model. So David Bell is a 87.9, if you want to get specific, percentile prospect in my model, and Johan Dotson is 85.8. So based on my rookie model pre-draft, David Bell is actually ahead of Johan Dotson. But I think the film tick for me goes to Johan Dotson. I also think that I don't weight draft capital in it, but I think that Johan Dotson's going to get that interest from the NFL. And I worry that certainly the news we've seen over the past few weeks since the combine, I think that the love on David Bell is falling. And I think that he's going to end up being a day 2, probably a round 3 pick rather than a first round pick. And that will, for me, take him out of that sort of early second round contention.
So, Matt, one last question for you before we move on this one. Where would you be comfortable taking him in your rookie drafts?
Yeah, so it's a little bit like Rich maybe in the last one with Dodson. He's probably getting up there towards maybe back end of the first. If he falls to me at the start of the second round, then I'm ecstatic with that. Just going back to the point you made about target share as well, like I touched upon, we're talking Rondale Moore was there as well. Whatever you think about Rondale Moore and the fact now he's in the NFL, there's going to be people that think he's not the guy we all thought he was, but there's no denying what a great talent he was in college as well. The fact that Bell's competing for targets with a guy like that, a guy that they were manufacturing touches for, a little bit like they've been doing in the NFL and the Cardinals, getting him involved as much as possible. The fact that he is still being able to be that target hog, I think it says something about him. There's the quarterback. He's the quarterback's best friend, really. He's that kind of, like I say, that kind of guy that you can throw the ball up and more often than not, he's the kind of guy that's coming down with it. And yeah, Rich makes some valid points as well. The fact it translating over to the NFL, it is a completely different game, and we see it every year, don't we? With the incoming rookies, are they going to translate over to the NFL? And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I personally think that Bell has the capabilities and the qualities to be able to shine in the NFL, and I'm hoping that he does get that draft capital. Personally, I think he could. If he can get second round draft capital, and I do still believe that he has the talent that he can get that kind of draft capital, then I think people are going to start to then understand that he's obviously respecting the game. A lot of these NFL coaches, they obviously see something in him, and with that, I'd like to think that people start to get excited about. I see the comps to Devonta Adams, Liam, so that might be something that get you excited, being a Packers fan. Again, a little bit like we just spoke with Dotson. I don't quite see the Devonta Adams in him, but it's a nice little comp to think about.
Devonta Adams is the best route runner in the league. I'm not sure that David Bell was anywhere near that.
Don't shoot the messenger, Rich. I'm just relaying what I've seen on Twitter.
I don't like comps. Just purely for that, everyone goes for the top level comp, and no one ever thinks, maybe it's someone mid tier or lower tier.
Maybe we should try the Daryl Morey version of he only allows comps if it's cross-racial. He doesn't allow any. So yeah, that might be. You can't compare short white slot receivers to Wes Welker or Julian Edelman.
We've got to have the high end comps. I mean, no one's going to get it. It's like me if my girlfriend says that I look like I don't know, Brad Pitt. I'd rather be compared to that than Dave from accounting that she works with. So I want that high end comp at least. At least give me something.
That's slightly different, mate. That's slightly different.
we want the high end comps.
Right. Before you set me off on a comp rant, like I do with tight end premium, let's move on to the next player we've got on the list. Yet another wide receiver, but this one seems to be. You seem to be on the same page, both of you. So this one's Skye Moore coming out of Western Michigan. Matt, you've got him as your wide receiver 8. Rich has got him 1 ahead of him at wide receiver 7. What can you tell us about Skye Moore? And is there any way, or what is the reason you've got him higher than DLF ADP that is wide receiver 10 right now?
Yeah, I'm glad we finally found a player that hopefully me and Rich can agree on here. And he's for me, he's just a really exciting player. Somebody that when I first saw him, first saw people talking about him, really caught my eye. Just looking at the stats as a true junior season, 94 receptions, just under 1,300 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. The fact that he's decided to forego his senior season as well and declare for the NFL draft, that's something that you've definitely got to pay attention to. The fact that he is going to be an early declarant for the NFL. And yeah, if you are a film grinder, then I think Skye Moore is somebody that you're going to absolutely fall in love with. The fact that he is so versatile, If you look right back to his high school days, he actually played quarterback and cornerback as well. So a guy that's been on both sides, offense and defense, and I think that's something that can potentially help a guy like Skye Moore. Obviously, is somebody that knows what the defense is going to do to try and stop him, because obviously he's played in that position. And hopefully, that's something he can then use to translate to elevate his game. Really explosive, great yard after the catch ability. Quite similar to Dodson, one of the smaller wide receivers in the class, but for me, I've got him actually a tier above Dodson. I think he's actually, I'm more impressed by Skye Moore than I am Dodson. In all honesty, had a really solid combine appearance over the last couple of weeks, and yeah, another guy that I think can make an instant impact. Obviously, we've got to find out the draft capital and the landing spot, which is going to be key again for somebody like Skye Moore. But yeah, definitely a guy that I'm really excited about, and just looking forward to see when he gets selected in the NFL draft.
Rich, where do you think he's going to be, or where are you seeing him being selected right now in mock drafts? Do you have any insight on that?
I hate to disappoint you, Liam, but I try not to look at mock drafts. So I literally have no idea. You could tell me he was a second round pick or later. I guess he's probably going to be a day 2 prospect, because I don't think he's going to sneak into that back end of the first. I think, Matt, whilst to pick up on your points, I think that was fantastic, but I think you probably undersold it in that he played quarterback and DB in high school.
Yep.
He's then gone to college and he was a first team all MAC wide receiver as a true freshman. Like, this is a guy that had never played wide receiver before, stepped onto the college field and was an all first team conference wide receiver. Like, that shows how impressive he was the second he moved onto the field. And I'm really excited. I think part of the reason he is ranked lower in the kind of consensus ranks than I think he probably deserves to be is that it's that, we talked about the Calvin Johnson theory with the big wide receivers, and, people are chasing that 6'4", 220 pounds, 4'4" wide receiver because they perceive big and fast means fantasy points. But we saw it with Elijah Moore. I was banging the drum for Elijah Moore saying that he's not just a slot receiver, and he gets to the NFL and was used more outside than he was in the slot. And I think that Skye Moore, whilst I don't think he's the athlete and the route runner that Elijah Moore was, people are pigeonholing him saying he's just a slot receiver. And I really don't think he is. I think he's got enough route running now that I think he can be used outside. Don't get me wrong, I think he's probably going to be best when he's getting those free releases out of the slot. But I think he can be a movable piece. I don't think he's just going to be pigeonholed as a slot receiver. From an analytical tool side, receiving yards per team pass attempt, he's fantastic. You look at his PPR breakout age, his total touchdowns per game was a little bit low, but you'd expect the type of receiver he is. He's slightly smaller bodied. He's not going to score a load of touchdowns. But from pretty much every other kind of analytical aspect that I look at, he scored really well. In pre-draft model, he's a 90th percentile guy. If he can get day 2 draft capital, then yeah, I'm very high on him. As I said, he's my wide receiver 7 at the moment. He's basically neck and neck with Johan Dotson for that next receiver up, shall we say, after the top 5. And I could easily see him if he gets that early day 2. He could certainly sneak into my wide receiver 6 spot come May.
So, looking at a few mock drafts in the past week or so, as of recording, he started to go in the first round. But before that, there's been a lot of round 2, round 3. So it's basically a day 2 pick, with sometimes him dropping into round 4. So, if he does get that day 2 capital, Rich, are you solidifying him where he is right now in your rankings at wide receiver 7?
Yeah, look, it's difficult for me to sit here and say draft capital is like 46% of my overall grade. So, draft capital makes a lot. So if you're saying to me he's a day 2 pick, but, there could be 10 receivers that go in the first round, who knows? So I don't want to be held to saying, yeah, if he's day 2 pick, he's going to be wide receiver 6. But look, I think if you're saying there's some mocks that have got him sneaking into the first, I'd be shocked. I think he's probably going to end up in that Elijah Moore range of being an early day 2 wide receiver. I think is where I'd project him purely based on where I have him ranked as a wide receiver. I don't really have a clue what teams and what needs they have and what they're looking for in that range.
So, Matt, I just want to get this in because I've never seen a target share this high. 39.5% target share. That's 99th percentile for Skye Moore. Does that come into your evaluation process at all?
A little bit, maybe not as much for the guys we just talked about, mainly because the fact to play for Western Michigan, it's not the elite level. We're not talking like an Alabama or a Clemson kind of college. It's Western Michigan. So I think because of the talent and that's no knock on Western Michigan, but I just think that with the talent he has, it made sense that he was going to be the guy that was seeing all the target. And as I say, the fact that he's so versatile as well. I think that only adds to the fact that they needed to get the ball in his hands as much as possible, really, and let Skye Moore do what he does best, and that's just produce the yards, whether it be through the air or when he's got the ball in his hands, he's capable of either. So, it's obviously something that you definitely got to take notice of, and it's obviously impressive looking at, but maybe just a little caveat is maybe the level of competition that he had to face.
So let's move on to the last wide receiver we've got on this list. And we're back to you two disagreeing, which is what I like the most because I like to hear both sides of the coin. So, Matt, you're currently higher on the next prospect, which is Jalen Tolbert. You've got him as your wide receiver 9. Mm-hmm. How are you going to try and convince Rich to move him up higher in his pre-draft rankings?
Rich is a tough cookie, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to move him too much. I can't compete with the model that he's created, so I might be struggling. But again, this is another guy that really impressed me when I started to hear about the name and see him being spoke about in the community. He's a guy that I checked out and really impressed me. In recent weeks, again, he's a guy that had a really solid combine, ran a 4.49 40-yard dash. So the fact that he's 6'1", just under 200 pounds, the fact that he is able to put up a really impressive 40-yard dash, it then alludes to the fact that he's a really solid athlete. He actually redshirted his freshman year due to a preseason injury, but when he has been playing, he's been really productive again in 2020, just over 1,000 receiving yards, and then this past season, just under 1,500 receiving yards. One of the top dominate ratings in the entire class in 31%, which was third, I believe, in the class. Great route runner, really good speed, as I touched upon. The fact that he's so agile as well for a guy that's getting up there over 6 foot, something that really impressed me. Seen a lot of comps and I actually did a thread on him on Twitter when I do these under the rookie radar threads that I tend to do through the off season. He's a guy that I've likened towards Marvin Jones. I think there's a lot in his game that really translates to what Marvin Jones does over in the NFL. And for me, he's just a guy that's really solid. Obviously, we know how deep this wide receiver class is, so it's going to be hard for people for there to be a consensus ranking where we're all in agreement. I think because of how deep this class is, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, which let's be honest, it's great. It's why we love fantasy football, the different opinions, learning from people. But yeah, Tolbert's a guy that I'm really high on. I think he could be a great mid-round pick in the NFL. I don't believe he's going to get that kind of draft capital like the guys have just touched upon. But if he can sneak into that late day too, then he definitely becomes somebody I'm interested in. Liam, let's get him over to Green Bay. We know that your guys need a wide receiver. So yeah, another one that I'd love to see maybe go over to Green Bay, get him a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and let's see what he can do.
I'll be honest, if we draft Jalen Tolbert and don't take a wide receiver before him, I will be I won't be the happiest. Let's put it that way.
What are you talking about, Liam? The way the NFL's going at the moment, you got for listeners, we're recording this on the day of the Tyreek Hill trade. But let's be honest, by the time this probably gets released, I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers have traded for DK Metcalf or maybe AJ Brown's been on 3 different teams since we recorded or something. It feels like that's the way the off season's going. So why not?
Absolutely. I mean, I am seeing a few tweets around getting Brandon Cooks or Tyler Lockett or someone along those lines. And although I don't mind them, I'd rather just
body at this point. Let's be honest, just a warm body in the room, receiver room. It'd be nice, I'm sure.
I just want us to use one of our first 2 first round picks on them. That would be.
You've got Amari Rodgers. You've got Amari Rodgers, Liam. I mean,
don't start him on Amari Rodgers. He only stopped banging on about him about halfway through the year. So.
No, this is it. It's Amari Rodgers season.
I love Amari Rodgers, but until Randall Cobb goes, he's not going to have the opportunity to do what I think he could do. Anyway, it's not sleepers for 2020. And yes, Amari Rodgers was one of my sleepers from last year. Rich, bringing it back to Jalen Tolbert, why are you not as high on him as Matt?
I think that, without wanting to go back to my Calvin Johnson theory, I think the only reason he's getting boosted in terms of his value is because he's tall and he's big and he's fast. And I think that I don't think he's a very good route runner. I think he struggled early in his career. He had a great receiving yards per team pass attempt stat, but if you look at the age at which he did it was late. He's 23 years old as we speak.
23.
I don't want to be ageist, but that's old for a rookie wide receiver. I worry that...
Cooper Kupp, he was an old receiver as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely terrible.
yeah, completely. The difference was that Cooper Kupp was an incredible route runner, and I just think that Jalen Tolbert, for me, he's, if he's an older prospect in a small school, I need him to be absolutely dominating. And whilst, yes, don't get me wrong, he did well. Matt said third highest dominate rate in the class. I don't think he's incredible. And I worry that he's going to fall into that day 3 category. And me and day 3 wide receivers, they don't exist. So, I look, if he gets day 2 capital, he'll probably jump up a bit for me. But I've currently got him. So he's a 77th percentile prospect for me. Mainly because his draft age percentile, his yards per team pass attempt breakout age are lower than they kind of need to be, quite frankly. I'm all about age adjusted production, and basically his production didn't come until he was old.
You couldn't have put that any nicer, could you? Until he was old.
Well, look, I got accused of being ageist for my Kenny Pickett hate. That I told him he was old. So why not continue and just be the ageist guy that doesn't like old rookies?
You say that, but then you keep saying that I'm young, and he's only a year older than me. So. Pick one, mate. Pick one.
Well, there's a difference, Liam. You're not an NFL rookie that's coming out of the draft, are you? I don't think of myself as old, but in terms of NFL wide receiver age, I'd probably been selling me in Dynasty leagues 2 years ago.
Only 2.
All right.
Right, Matt, before I annoy Rich any further, is there anything else on Jalen Tolbert that you could try and persuade Rich on? Or do you think he's pretty set in his ways at this point?
I've tried my best, Lee, man. I picked out a big wide receiver in David Bell that's not athletic. He doesn't like him. I picked out an athletic one, and he still doesn't like him. So I'm trying my best here with these players, and I'm having no joy at all in moving Rich. But hopefully when it comes around to the draft, if he can, and I do get what he's saying about a draft capital, that's something that's definitely, if he does end up being a day 3 guy, then you've got to start being concerned that we don't really see it very often, do we? These later guys produce. It turns into a bit of a needing to be a unicorn for him to excel. But I still believe in the talent, and I do think if he can scrape into that day 2 draft capital, then I assume that people are now going to start paying a little bit more attention to him. But for this moment in time, it's all just hearsay. But yeah, I'm still confident, Liam. I'm never going to convince Rich on so I'll have to work on you, Liam. Hopefully you'll jump on my side and we can get Talbot together.
We'll have to see on that one. I'm not overly convinced, but before I break your heart a little bit more, I'm going to move on to Jerome Ford, the next player that you put on this list, Matt. Running back coming out of Cincinnati. He did transfer from Alabama, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
He's going to be coming into the league at 20, or coming into the draft at 22, but I think he starts the season as 23. I need to double check his date of birth. But What can you tell us about Jerome Ford? Because you are looking at ADP compared to your ranks, you are considerably higher on him.
I am. Yeah, this is probably my crush of the draft class. Taking it back to last year, this is like Michael Carter all over again for me. This is going to be the guy that you're going to get fed up of hearing me talking about, I think, because I'm really high and I've got him as my RB4, and I know that's way above. I've seen Rich where you've got him, and let's just say I'm definitely a little bit higher than what you are on him. But yeah, like you said, Liam, a guy that he was actually recruited by Alabama, but. I mean, when you're behind guys like Josh Jacobs, Damian Harris, and Najee Harris, it's tough for you to get any kind of look in with those guys in the way that they were performing over at Alabama. But when he transferred over to Cincinnati, he actually split the backfield with Jared Dokes, the guy that was picked up by the Dolphins last year. In 2020, he split the backfield with him. But once he moved on and he claimed this backfield, that's when he really broke out this previous season. 250 carries, just over 1,300 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns, and then also had a little bit of usage in the receiving game as well. 21 receptions, just over 200 receiving yards and a touchdown. He was actually first amongst AAC running backs in rushing yards, in touchdowns, in forced missed tackles. So a guy that really produced last season. He's a really explosive guy. The fact that he's 5'11", I think he was listed at like 220 when he was at college, but when you look at the combine, he actually dropped some weight for that, and he was down to around 210 pounds, but still a really explosive guy. Somebody, it reminds me a lot of like a Miles Sanders with that burst and that agility, and the fact that maybe he wasn't used as much in the receiving game, but I do think that he is definitely a capable receiving back. Really impressed as well at the Senior Bowl a couple of months ago. And yeah, another guy that with the draft capital and the landing spot, I can see him shooting up people's draft board, because if you watch the film on him, he's a really exciting guy to watch. A big play guy that can burst off those big runs.
Rich, have you seen the tape on Jerome Ford? What do you make of him? Do you find him just as exciting?
I'll be honest, I struggled with Jerome Ford as a kind of a review, because I completely agree with, I agree with like 90% of what Matt said. I think that he's really explosive, and I think he pops off the tape in terms of that explosiveness, and he's the kind of guy that can create something out of nothing. And I love that. But my kind of analytical side, he basically did nothing until he left Alabama. And I get that, Alabama is not your normal college, but it's just like, if he was an NFL prospect, he would have carved out some sort of role at Alabama. And I can't let that go. But I also think you said about he's a good pass catching back. And I think, yes, okay, I think when people talk about pass catching backs, I think there's kind of two different things, in that there's a guy that can catch passes that are thrown to him in terms of dump offs and screen games. I liken that to someone like a Derrick Henry, where he can literally run 5 yards in a direction, turn around and have the ball thrown to him and he won't drop it. And I think Jerome Ford falls in that category. Jerome Ford is not a guy that is going to get creative in terms of his route running. He's not going to get split out wide. He's not going to get used in creative ways. And I think that, to me, that means he's probably going to be pigeonholed to a 2-down back. And that's where I worry that could eat into his kind of fancy production. I think he needs to be, and it could be a case of, look, hold my hands up. This guy could absolutely produce. But I feel like, given the fact he couldn't produce at Alabama, given the fact that, for me, I think he's not creative in the passing game, I'd rather take a bet somewhere else.
I will just touch upon, when he was recruited, he was actually listed as an all-purpose back. So, I mean, when he was coming out of high school, he was labelled as a guy that can be used in both phases of the game. That's somebody like... I can't think. There's somebody else. Karen Williams, I think, in this class. It was listed as an all-purpose back as well. So I just think the fact that it was listed, I believe in high school, it was used in both phases of the game. And sometimes it can all boil down to the offense that he's on.
Absolutely.
That, I mean, in Cincinnati, the quarterback Desmond Ridder as well. This is a guy that runs the ball a lot. They've obviously built that offense around around the abilities that he has as a quarterback. So I do get your point, but I do think there are signs that point towards that he can be used in the receiving game.
Yeah, look, I'll hold my hands up. I think that's a fantastic point. The fact that Desmond Ridder is that mobile quarterback. We talk about how Jalen Hurts has affected the receiving usage of someone like a Miles Sanders. Maybe I'm being too harsh on Jerome Ford. I've just written myself a note down. I'm going to go away and watch some more Jerome Ford tape and see if maybe I'm being a bit harsh on first review, because like you said, Desmond Ridder is a fantastic athlete. He is a guy that's moved around in the pocket, and maybe I'm pigeonholing Jerome Ford as a 2-down back, but actually he could offer that, all 3-down potential. And if he does, and if I think he could, then he'd certainly jump higher in my ranks.
Finally done it, Liam. I'm finally convinced. I've found a player that I can convince him on.
Sorry to do. Go on, Rich.
I was going to say, let's try and do the next one then, because you've definitely hung your hat on this guy.
I was going to say this one might be a little bit harder, so sorry to do this to you and maybe snatch that victory away from you a little bit. But the next player you've put down on this list, Matt, is Sincere McCormick. I'll be honest, when I saw the name, I had to go and see how it was pronounced because I'd not heard of him. I haven't done as much research as I would have wanted to into this class. So that's probably just me not knowing the pure depth of this class. But he's going as the RB21 in the 2022 class. I had to think about that one, man. In DLF ADP, but you have him down as your running back 7. That seems like a flag plant if I've ever seen one before.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've just said Jerome Ford's my guy. Maybe I need to say that I'm more of a Sincere McCormick stan, because I didn't realize that I was this high on him compared to what everybody else was. I didn't think that he was that low down in terms of the consensus rankings, but I got him up as my RB7. I mean, this is a guy that all he does is produce, and this, like we've just touched upon in the previous play, this is a guy that does it in both phases of the game. Over 1,000 yards as a freshman, over 1,500 yards as a sophomore and as a junior. Just looking over at some of the PFF stats on last season, 754 yards after contact, 47 forced missed tackles. He had 31 runs over 10 yards, so those big play runs. This is a guy that produces them. He's an early declarant as well, 21 years old, I believe, at this moment in time. I get there's going to be concerns because of the school he's from as well, UTSA. It's another one of these small school running backs. But a guy that and Liam, I'm surprised you don't know about him, because I did a rookie thread on him. I thought you loved all my content, so I thought you'd have known about this guy already. clearly just proving that you don't care about my content, Liam. But
calling me out. I don't get to see every single thread that you put out, Matt.
I'm only joking.
You need to put alerts on Matt's tweets.
That's it. You need to get them notifications on Liam. But no, a guy that when we did the thread on him, it reminds me a lot of Aaron Jones, and there's going to be a lot of things that you can comp into. The fact that he's from such a small school, I believe that he's going to be a later round pick in the NFL. This is not a guy that I can say hopefully can scrape day 2, because to be honest, I do think he's going to be a day 3 back, just like Aaron Jones was. But a guy that both these guys productive as freshmen, maybe doesn't have that top elite speed that you'd maybe like to see from a guy that's a bit of a smaller back in McCormick. But another guy that I think is really exciting. But we need to see that the landing spot's going to play a big part on somebody like McCormick, because, as I say, I think he is going to be one of the later guys in terms of the NFL draft, and a guy that we need to get him on a team where he's at least going to see some opportunities. But if he does get those opportunities, I'm clearly a stan, so I'll be excited if he can land somewhere where he can see some early production.
Rich, do you think that he's going to be the next Aaron Jones in terms of situation, getting drafted as a day 3 pick and then becoming a top dynasty asset? Or do you think that he's going to stick where your rank has got him, which is much closer to DLF ADP at rank 20?
I think if you just take, so first of all, McCormick was a guy that he was outside my top 20, so I hadn't watched film on, so I didn't have a film grade. So Matt made me go and watch the film. So I think he's all right. I'm not blown away by him. From an analytical standpoint, I think the Aaron Jones comp is fantastic. So obviously you've got the same conference in terms of where they're going. I think, similar kind of probably draft pedigree. If you're looking in terms of age-adjusted production, both age 18 running back breakouts, both had elite yards per team pass attempt. Aaron Jones was a little bit better in terms of receiving market share. Again, Aaron Jones is also a little bit better in terms of touchdown percentage market share, but both, above average. And then the real kind of concern is that Aaron Jones was a 28th percentile weight-adjusted speed score. Sincere McCormick we're talking 11th percentile weight-adjusted speed score. And I think that's my big concern, is that Aaron Jones has shown that he's got enough that he can overcome that kind of lack of top-end speed. And that'll be the biggest question on McCormick, is he going to be able to overcome essentially being a short, heavy, slow back? So I don't hate it. It's certainly not enough there that I saw on tape to get him inside my top 20. Okay, if draft capital completely changes, maybe he'll sneak up. But yeah, I get what Matt's saying. I think, I'll be honest, running back 7 might be a little bit too extreme. But I completely get it, because you're taking a guy that has got a very similar profile that has proved to be a success in the NFL. And whilst, as I said, yes, there are two big concerns in terms of conference and that weight-adjusted speed score, we've seen a guy overcome it very recently.
So are you thinking he might be less of an Elijah Moore that goes later on in the draft and in both the NFL draft and the rookie drafts, and then becomes a year one producer? Do you think that if he does produce, it'll be more like an Aaron Jones in year 3, year 2, year 3, maybe even further?
I think it's difficult
if he produces,
isn't it? I think the way that I'm always approaching rookie drafts is that I'm I'm taking my best player available round 1, round 2. But after round 2, I'm basically just drafting as many running backs as I can. So I'll probably have some decent shares of Sincere McCormick, because if he's going to be 20th running back off the board, I'm going to be comfortable taking him as a 3rd round pick, where most people probably wouldn't. That's just the way I'll always approach rookie drafts. So yeah, hopefully he's Aaron Jones 2.0, but yeah, I'm not sure that I'm quite having that high hope. I think that's quite a high standard to set for a guy that's probably going to be, let's be honest, a 6th or 7th round pick.
And I know I said day 3, but 6 or 7. I think we can go a bit higher than that, Rich. I was thinking more maybe 4th, 5th round, not bearing him down there in 6 or 7.
Running backs always fall, don't they? We always think that there's going to be a lot more drafted day 1, day 2, and they always fall. I hate to do this to you, Matt, but look at Michael Carter last year.
I knew that would come. I could feel you teed yourself up for it. I just knew that was coming.
We were talking about him potentially being a 2nd round pick, and he fell to the 4th. And yeah. I think that with running backs, I think we see wide receivers, tackles, cornerbacks pushed up every draft, and I think we see running backs, safeties, linebackers fall further than we think every draft. So I really do think that whatever kind of projected draft capital you've got for a day 2, day 3 running back, probably take a round off it, and that's probably about where they'll go.
I'll be honest, Matt, I'm going to move this on before Rich throws a shot at Kenneth Gainwell as well, because that didn't work out for me either. So, Matt, I'll let you introduce the next guy, because just so the listeners know, Matt put this guy on the list, and both me and Rich cannot find basically anything. I found one bit of film. Rich has found one bit of film. Looking on Player Profiler, he has his height, his weight, and his hand size, I believe, and that is it. In his college, sorry. He doesn't even have his age on Player Profiler right now.
My rookie spreadsheet is pretty detailed, and this guy wasn't on there. So yeah, over to you, Matt.
Yeah, well, when you bring me on a sleeper show, I mean, I've got to throw at least somebody that you haven't heard of and get you guys thinking. So, as I say, it was good to know that I had you both scrambling, looking for film and some notes on this guy. But it's Cole Kelly. He's a quarterback who played for Southeastern Louisiana. As I said, he is flying under the radar. There's a lot of people that probably don't even know who Cole Kelly is. Again, if you follow my stuff, I produced a thread on him, a rookie thread. So if you want a little bit more information on him, you can check that out on my Twitter page. But yeah, this is definitely my wild card selection. Keeping it to the podcast that I'm co-host on. This is definitely a wild card selection. But a big guy, 6'7", 260 pound. I don't know if I said that he's a quarterback, but when Liam spoke about his hand size, I'm going to assume that we all gathered that this is a quarterback that we're talking about. But
you're talking about defensive end at that size.
He is definitely a big boy, but considering that the size that he is, he can actually move. He's got a little something about him. Maybe not a Cam Newton kind of big-bodied scrambler, but I think maybe in terms of somebody like Justin Herbert, a guy that can definitely do something on the ground and extend plays in and out of the pocket. But as I say, yeah, definitely a guy that's gone under the radar. A lot of people probably don't know this, but he actually committed to Arkansas when he left high school and entered college. Entered a bit of a quarterback battle as a freshman, and that was in 2017. And 2018, he actually got arrested for driving under the influence, and that kind of derailed his entire career at that stage. Ended up returning home to Southeastern Louisiana. But once he went over there, absolutely lit it up. And the disclaimer is this is very low level competition in terms of who he was facing. But as I say, absolutely lit it up. If you look at some of the key stats on him, 81.6% adjusted completion percentage, which is the highest in this draft class. 2.3% turnover worthy play rate, which is the one of the lowest in this class. As I say, the caveat to that is the level of competition that he's faced in recent years. Liam, you touched upon you don't know his age. I can tell you he's 24 years old, so he's definitely not.
Have to Google that.
Yeah, he's definitely not. He's not one of these young guys, and you probably guessed that when I said that he was a freshman in 2017. But as I say, a guy that's produced despite it being at a lower level, and the fact that he was actually even selected, even committed to Arkansas shows that he has something about him. He had something about him in terms of high school. And as I say, it just didn't quite work out. There's going to be arguments against the kind of guy that he is. I hear a lot of things that is maybe not one of the best in terms of a guy that you want in the locker room, and that has to raise concerns. But I just think we're talking Superflex. Obviously, if you're in a 1 QB league, you probably don't really care about anything I've got to say about Cole Kelly because he's just going to be on your waivers. But I think there's just that chance if he can land in a good situation. Rich, I know that you tweeted recently about the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mitch Trubisky, the kind of contract that he's on. If they don't go for a quarterback early on, and somebody like Cole Kelly can get there in the later rounds, if Trubisky don't perform early on in that first season and this guy gets a chance, then that's when I start to get excited and believe in that talent that I do think that he has, and hopefully can then. It's a little bit like Gardner Minshew all over again. This is going to be one of those guys that nobody knows about. They're going to get excited when they see this 6'7" beast walk onto the NFL field, and yeah, just a fun little sleeper. That if he turns out, I'm going to look like an absolute genius, and this will all be worth it.
Well, if he's 24, so he's older than Kenny Pickett. So
yeah, and you didn't like Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, if he can find a team that will draft him and sit behind someone for a couple of years, maybe he'll get a chance to start by the time he's 30.
Well, we can all hope.
Maybe he turns into the new Taysom Hill.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think he's quite to that level of. Able to run the ball and receive. He's not quite that kind of gadget quarterback, but as I say, he's a big guy. Maybe he probably ends up being a defensive player playing nose tackle or something like that. I don't know. But
he just needs to. I'll tell you what, Matt, you've probably nailed him as a sleeper, but he's probably going to end up being the next Logan Thomas and be a tight end.
That's a great shout. I mean, for the size that he is, yeah, there's the potential and I'm gonna claim it, Rich. If that happens, I'm claiming it. I'll just get you to edit the fact that I said quarterback is a tight end, and I'll look brilliant.
Matt, it's been brilliant having you on, mate.
Appreciate it.
I don't think either of us have got anything on Cole Kelly. That was a very deep dive. But it is absolutely great having you on. Where can the listeners find you, find your work? Is there anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. Like we touched upon at the start, I'm a writer over for the FF Astronauts. Admittedly, not done a great deal of it recently, but that's because I've been putting a lot of focus and attention over onto the podcast that I do with my fellow co-host Kevin Alley, and that's the Fantasy Wildcard, which you can follow on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. We've got the upcoming Streamathon as well. That's coming up in May. Another thing that's really exciting, that's something that we did last year. It's a charity streamathon, and it's all for Mind, the charity that I think it's close to a lot of people's heart, obviously for mental health and everything that's going on in the world over the last couple of years. It's something that's people are starting to really understand that it's quite a serious thing, and it's good that we're able to talk about it, and the fact that we can help. Brilliant. So really, really happy if you could check that out and support us over there. But yeah, just want to say thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I've tried my best to sway Rich in some of his evaluations. I think maybe I might have got one there that maybe I can work on it, and maybe Cole Kelly as well. Seeing as you didn't know him, maybe is at least going to make his way onto that spreadsheet of yours, Rich. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys, and it's been a lot of fun.
I'd take both of them as a win, Matt, honestly. You don't get to sway Rich often. So
it's two more players than Liam's managed to sway me on in the last year. So
yeah, and it'll continue as if nothing else happened, Rich. I'll never be able to sway you on anyone. But yeah, as Matt said, the Streamathon will be a great event. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. I think it's the 21st of May.
I believe, 25. I'm terrible with dates, so I don't want to say for definite that it is, but I know it's late May, and if you go over to his Twitter page, there's a link on there and a tweet that Kev put out about it. So you can find it over there.
Yeah, so both me and Rich are on there, and I know that you've got a lot of other guests that are brilliant. So if you can check any point of the Streamathon, if not all of it, it'd be brilliant for everyone involved. Follow Matt over at MattFFDynasty on Twitter. And thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week. Have a nice one.